Whose fleet crosses our borders? The Empire trembled at the answer. Earth's Admiral HFY stood on the bridge of the mighty dreadnought, Eternal Dominion, his forearms crossed behind his back as he gazed at the tactical display. The holographic map showed the outer rim of the Calaxian Empire, where mysterious ships had been detected crossing their sacred borders. His scaled skin rippled with annoyance as he processed the reports flooding in from patrol vessels. "Another incursion, Admiral," announced Communications Officer Veltar, her tentacles dancing across the control panel with practiced precision. "Sector 7 Alpha, 3 unknown vessels, configuration unlike anything in our databases." HFY's primary eyes narrowed, while his secondary pair focused on the data streaming across his personal display. In his 800 years of service to the Empire, he had never encountered ships that didn't immediately identify themselves when challenged. Every civilized species in the galaxy knew the protocols. You announced your presence, stated your business, and waited for permission to proceed. It was the way things had been done for millennia. "Show me," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority that had crushed 17 rebellions and expanded the Empire's borders across 43 star systems. The main view screen shimmered and displayed long-range sensor data. 3 sleek vessels moved through space with an efficiency that made HFY's combat-hardened mind take notice. They weren't running or hiding. They moved with purpose, as if they owned the void between stars. "Have we attempted communication?" HFY asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Yes, sir. Standard hails on all frequencies. They acknowledge our transmissions but refuse to identify themselves or their point of origin. When Patrol Group Delta demanded they halt for inspection, they simply continued on their course." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. In the Empire's long history, such defiance was unheard of. Species that failed to respect Calaxian authority were swiftly reminded of their place in the galactic hierarchy. The Empire's fleet was the largest and most advanced in known space. Their technology had been perfected over thousands of years, and their military doctrine had never failed them. "Deploy Battlegroup Hammer," HFY ordered, his decision swift and final. 6 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 40 fighter squadrons. These tourists will learn respect for our borders. Captain Mordex, the ship's tactical officer, hesitated before speaking. "Sir, intelligence reports suggest these vessels possess unusual energy signatures. Perhaps we should—" "Captain," HFY interrupted, his tone cutting through the officer's words like a plasma blade. "Are you suggesting that 3 unknown ships pose a threat to an entire battle group of the Imperial Navy?" "No, sir. Of course not, sir." "Good. Signal Battlegroup Hammer. They are to intercept these vessels and either force them to comply with our authority or remove them from our space. Permanently." As the orders went out across the fleet's communication network, HFY allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Calaxian Empire had not maintained its dominance for 3,000 years by showing weakness to every upstart species that wandered into their territory. These mysterious ships would serve as an example to any other would-be trespassers. 3 hours later, the first reports from Battlegroup Hammer began arriving. What they contained made HFY question whether his translators were malfunctioning. "Admiral," Veltar announced, her usually steady voice carrying an edge of uncertainty. "Battlegroup Hammer reports contact with the unknown vessels. And, sir, the unknown ships they've asked to speak with someone in charge." HFY's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a reflexive gesture that occurred when his mind struggled to process unexpected information. "They asked to speak with someone in charge? While surrounded by 18 ships of the Imperial Navy?" "Yes, sir. Commander Tholvin reports that when his ships moved to intercept, the unknown vessels simply stopped and transmitted a message requesting dialogue with Imperial leadership. They made no aggressive moves, raised no shields, charged no weapons. Show me the communication. The main screen shifted to display the image of Commander Tholvin aboard his flagship. The veteran officer's expression was carefully neutral, but Zexhai could see the confusion in his subordinate's eyes. Admiral, Tholvin began. The situation is unusual. These ships don't match any known configuration in our databases. Their hulls appear to be constructed from materials our sensors can't fully identify. When we moved to surround them, they simply stopped and sent this message. A new voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfectly accented Calaxian standard. The voice was strange, neither the deep resonance of a Calaxian nor the high pitch of a Velnari, but something in between. It sounded almost pleasant. Greetings, Commander. We apologize for any concern our presence may have caused. We are representatives of the Terran Federation, and we would very much like to speak with someone in authority regarding our passage through this region of space. We have no hostile intentions and would prefer to handle this matter diplomatically. The message ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. In all his years of service, Zexhai had never heard an unknown species speak with such casual politeness while surrounded by enough firepower to crack a moon. Terran Federation, he muttered, running the words through the Empire's xenological databases. Nothing. No records of any species calling themselves Terrans. No mention of any federation in this region of space. Admiral, came another voice from the communication array. We're receiving additional reports from border sectors. Similar ships have been detected in 12 different systems, all following the same pattern: peaceful approach, polite communication, complete disregard for our authority. Zexhai felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The Empire's borders stretched across vast distances, and these Terrans had somehow appeared simultaneously in multiple sectors. That suggested either a fleet of considerable size or technology that could move vessels faster than Imperial ships could track them. "Patch me through to Commander Tholvin," he ordered. "You're live, sir." "Commander, are these ships threatening your vessels in any way?" "No, sir. They're just sitting there, waiting." "Have you scanned them for weapons?" "We've tried, sir. Our sensors are having difficulty penetrating their hull materials. We can detect energy sources, but we can't determine their purpose or capacity." Zexhai considered his options. The Empire's first law was strength. Show weakness, and subject species would inevitably test their boundaries. But something about this situation felt different from the usual challenges to Imperial authority. "Open a channel to these Terrans." "Channel open." "Sir, this is Admiral Zexhai of the Calaxian Imperial Navy. You have entered sovereign Imperial space without authorization. State your business or prepare to be escorted back to your point of origin." The response came quickly, delivered in the same pleasant tone that had somehow become more unsettling than any threat. "Admiral Zexhai, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the UFS Endeavor. We're explorers from a region you might not be familiar with. We call it the Local Group. We're not here to challenge your authority or claim your territory. We're simply mapping new trade routes and making contact with civilized species. We'd very much like to establish peaceful relations with the Calaxian Empire." "The Local Group?" Zexhai repeated. "Our star charts show no major civilizations in what you describe as the Local Group." "That's understandable, Admiral. We're quite a distance from here. We've developed some new propulsion technologies that allow us to travel much farther than previous generations could manage. We'd be happy to share some of our navigational data if it would help establish our peaceful intentions." Zexhai gestured for the channel to be muted. "Analysis," he demanded of his senior staff. Captain Mordex spoke first. "Sir, if they're telling the truth about their point of origin, they've traveled distances that should be impossible with any known propulsion system. The nearest major star systems outside our border regions are hundreds of light years away. Could they be lying about their origin? Possible. But why? If they were scouts for a neighboring power, they'd be more likely to use familiar technology and attempt deception. These ships are completely unknown to us. Science Officer Krellnin added her analysis. Admiral, preliminary scans suggest their hull materials contain elements that don't appear on our periodic tables. Either they're using some form of exotic matter we've never encountered, or they've developed manufacturing techniques far in advance of our own. The implications of that statement settled over the bridge like a cold wind. The Calaxian Empire prided itself on having the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their defenses stronger than any other species they'd encountered. The suggestion that these unknown Terrans might possess superior technology was almost unthinkable. "Admiral," Veltar announced, "we're receiving priority communications from Fleet Command. Similar Terran ships have now been detected in 37 border sectors. The pattern is consistent. Peaceful contact, requests for dialogue, complete technological unknowns." 37 sectors. That meant dozens, possibly hundreds of ships had somehow appeared along the Empire's borders simultaneously. No known species possessed the logistics to coordinate such an operation, let alone the fleet capacity to execute it. "Reopen the channel," Zexhai ordered. "Channel open, sir." "Captain Chen, exactly how many ships does your Federation have in Imperial space?" "Just enough for a proper introduction, Admiral. We believe in making good first impressions." The casual way she deflected his question only increased Zexhai's growing unease. In his experience, species with limited military capacity were eager to provide exact numbers to avoid seeming threatening. Species with vast fleets often boasted about their strength to intimidate potential enemies. Only a very confident species would answer such a direct question with humor. "Captain, I'm going to ask you directly. What does the Terran Federation want from the Calaxian Empire?" "Honestly, Admiral, we'd like to talk. We've been exploring this region of the galaxy for several months now, and the Calaxian Empire is by far the most impressive civilization we've encountered. We'd very much like to establish diplomatic relations and perhaps work out some trade agreements. We have technologies and resources that might be of interest to you, and I'm sure you have things that would fascinate our scientists and merchants." Zexhai found himself in an unprecedented situation. Here was an unknown species, clearly possessing advanced technology, asking for nothing more than conversation. In his experience, superior military forces demanded tribute, submission, or territorial concessions. They didn't ask politely for trade talks. "What assurances can you give that your intentions are peaceful?" "Admiral, if we'd wanted to cause trouble, would we really have announced our presence and asked permission to talk? Our ships are unarmed for this mission. We're explorers and diplomats, not conquerors." "Unarmed?" Captain Mordex whispered, leaning close to Zexhai's position. "Sir, that's either the truth or the most audacious lie in galactic history. No species travels this far from home without weapons." Zexhai nodded grimly. Either these Terrans were telling the truth, which meant they were confident enough in their defensive capabilities to explore hostile territory without weapons, or they were lying, which meant their weapons were so advanced that Imperial sensors couldn't detect them. Neither possibility was particularly comforting. "Captain Chen, you'll understand that the Empire must verify your claims. Would you be willing to allow one of our ships to conduct a detailed scan of your vessels?" "Of course, Admiral. We'd be happy to demonstrate our peaceful intentions. However, I should mention that our ships contain some technologies that your people might find unusual. We'd prefer to explain them in person rather than have your technicians discover them during a scan. Would it be possible to arrange a meeting?" A face-to-face meeting. The request was so reasonable, so obviously the next logical step in establishing diplomatic contact, that Zexhai almost agreed immediately. Then his centuries of military experience reasserted themselves. Face-to-face meetings were how infiltrators got close to their targets. They were how assassins eliminated key personnel. They were how spies gathered critical intelligence. But they were also how civilized species conducted diplomacy. I'll consider your request, Captain Chen. For now, your ships will remain under escort while we verify your claims and consult with our leadership. That's perfectly reasonable, Admiral. We'll wait for your decision. Oh, and, Admiral, thank you for handling this so professionally. We've encountered some species that were much less diplomatic in their first contact protocols. The transmission ended, leaving HFY staring at the tactical display. Dozens of unknown ships scattered across the Empire's borders, waiting patiently for permission to talk. It was either the most elaborate invasion in galactic history or exactly what it appeared to be. First contact with a previously unknown interstellar civilization. And deep in his combat-hardened mind, Admiral HFY began to suspect that the galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. Whose fleet crosses our borders? Second document. The Imperial Council chamber on Kalax Prime buzzed with tension as representatives from across the Empire gathered for an emergency session. Emperor Vaxthul sat upon the crystalline throne, his ancient form radiating the authority that had held the Empire together for 12 centuries. Around the circular chamber, holographic displays showed real-time tactical data from 47 border sectors where Terran ships continued their patient vigil. "Report," the Emperor commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute power. Admiral HFY stepped forward, his formal military bearing unchanged, despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Your Imperial Majesty, we have confirmation of first contact with an unknown species calling themselves the Terran Federation. Their ships appeared simultaneously across our borders 3 days ago. They claim to be peaceful explorers seeking diplomatic contact." "Claims," interrupted General Korthak, the Empire's Minister of War. His scarred carapace bore the marks of a dozen campaigns, and his tone carried the skepticism of a warrior who had seen deception masquerading as diplomacy. "Any species capable of coordinating such a large-scale operation possesses military capabilities that should concern us." "What do our intelligence services tell us about these Terrans?" asked Counselor Neith Ara, the Empire's chief xenologist. Her research into alien species had been instrumental in the Empire's expansion, providing crucial insights into the psychology and capabilities of potential subjects. "Nothing," Admiral HFY admitted. "No records in any database, no previous contact reported by any species within our sphere of influence. It's as if they appeared from nowhere." Emperor Vaxthul's primary eyes focused on the tactical display, while his secondary pair studied the faces of his council. "How many ships?" "Current count is 137 vessels across 47 sectors. The number continues to grow as our patrols detect additional contacts." The chamber fell silent. 137 ships represented a fleet larger than most species possessed in their entirety. For an unknown civilization to deploy such forces suggested either vast resources or technology that made ship construction trivially easy. "Your assessment of their capabilities?" the Emperor asked. Admiral HFY consulted his datapad. "Preliminary analysis is concerning, Your Majesty. Their hull materials resist our standard scanning methods. Energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. They demonstrate propulsion capabilities that allow near-instantaneous positioning across vast distances. Most significantly, they appear completely unconcerned by our military response." "Elaborate on that last point." "Sir, we've surrounded their ships with superior numbers and firepower. Standard Imperial doctrine would have any reasonable species either retreating or surrendering. These Terrans simply wait. They answer our communications politely, comply with our instructions to remain stationary, and seem content to stay in position indefinitely. General Korthok leaned forward in his seat. That suggests either supreme confidence in their defensive capabilities or complete ignorance of our military strength. Which do you believe it is, Admiral? Zexhai hesitated before answering. Based on their coordination and technology, I don't believe they're ignorant, sir. The implications hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. If these Terrans weren't intimidated by Imperial military might, it meant they possessed capabilities that made them confident in their ability to defend themselves. In the Empire's long history, only one other species had shown such casual disregard for Imperial authority, the extinct Morkani, whose home world had been reduced to radioactive dust as an example to others. Have they made any demands? Counselor Nithara asked. None, Admiral Zexhai replied. They've repeatedly requested dialogue with Imperial leadership. They claim to be interested in trade and diplomatic relations. They've offered to share navigational data and technologies as a gesture of goodwill. Technologies, the Emperor mused. What sort of technologies? They haven't specified, Your Majesty. Captain Chen mentioned that their ships contain systems we might find unusual and suggested explaining them in person rather than through sensor scans. Minister Felgoth, the Empire's chief economist, spoke for the first time. Your Majesty, if these Terrans possess advanced technologies and are genuinely interested in trade, the economic benefits could be substantial. New technologies have historically driven Imperial expansion and prosperity. General Korthak's response was immediate and harsh. Or they could be gathering intelligence on our capabilities while we waste time talking. The Empire's strength comes from projecting power, not from negotiating with every species that wanders into our territory. Emperor Vaxthul considered both perspectives. The Empire had grown strong through military conquest, but it had grown prosperous through careful incorporation of useful technologies and resources. The question was whether these Terrans represented an opportunity or a threat. Admiral, you've interacted with their representatives directly. What is your personal assessment? Zexhai straightened, knowing that his next words might determine the Empire's course of action. Your Majesty, in 8 centuries of service, I've encountered desperate species, hostile species, and terrified species. I've dealt with pirates, rebels, and conquerors. These Terrans don't fit any of those categories. They speak with the confidence of equals, not the deference of subjects or the aggression of enemies. Equals? General Korthak's voice carried dangerous undertones. The Calaxian Empire has no equals. With respect, General, Admiral Zexhai continued, that's exactly what concerns me. They don't act like subjects, and they don't act like enemies. They act like they have options. The chamber erupted in heated discussion as counselors debated the implications. Some argued for immediate military action to establish Imperial dominance. Others suggested cautious negotiation to determine Terran capabilities before committing to any course of action. A few recommended retreating from contact entirely until more intelligence could be gathered. Emperor Vaxthul raised one clawed hand, and silence returned instantly. Bring me Captain Chen. Sir? Admiral Zexhai asked. Arrange a meeting. If these Terrans want to talk, we'll talk. But the meeting will take place on Imperial terms, under Imperial conditions, with Imperial security. 6 hours later, the Imperial flagship, Celestial Authority, held position in the neutral zone between Imperial and Terran ships. The massive vessel, stretching over 2 kilometers in length, represented the pinnacle of Calaxian military engineering. Its weapons could sterilize planets. Its shields could withstand the focused fire of entire fleets, and its presence had ended wars simply by appearing in hostile systems. Admiral Zexhai stood in the primary docking bay, flanked by a full honor guard of Imperial Marines. The protocol was clear. Any visiting dignitary would see Imperial power displayed in all its glory. The message was simple. You are guests here, and you exist at our pleasure. The Terran shuttle that approached the docking bay was unlike anything in Imperial databases. Its hull was a seamless integration of curves and angles that seemed to flow like liquid metal. No visible weapon ports, no obvious engine outlets, no external sensors or communication arrays. It moved with impossible silence and grace, settling onto the deck with no detectable impact or vibration. As the shuttle's access port opened, Admiral HFY found himself holding his breath. First contact with a new species was always significant, but this felt different. These Terrans had demonstrated capabilities that challenged Imperial assumptions about galactic civilization. Whatever emerged from that shuttle would either confirm the Empire's continued dominance or force a fundamental reevaluation of their place in the galaxy. The first figure to exit was clearly the security detail. 3 individuals in form-fitting suits that seemed to blend armor with clothing. They moved with professional awareness, scanning the docking bay and positioning themselves with the precision of experienced soldiers. But they didn't look like any soldiers HFY had ever seen. They were tall, bipedal, with pale skin and an unusual amount of hair on their heads. Their movements were economical and confident, suggesting excellent physical conditioning and combat training. Behind them came Captain Chen herself. Admiral HFY had expected many things, but not what he saw. Captain Sarah Chen was smaller than her escort. Perhaps 1.75 meters tall, with dark hair bound in a practical style and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail of her surroundings. She wore a simple uniform that somehow managed to look both professional and approachable. Most surprising of all, she smiled as she approached, not the careful diplomatic smile that HFY had learned to recognize, but what appeared to be genuine pleasure at meeting new people. "Admiral HFY," she said, extending one hand in what HFY's cultural database identified as a human greeting gesture. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I hope we can work together to establish positive relations between our peoples." HFY carefully returned the gesture, noting that despite her smaller stature, Captain Chen's grip was firm and her bearing confident. "Captain Chen, you and your people have certainly made an impressive introduction to Imperial space." "We do try to make good first impressions," she replied with that same easy smile. "Though I suspect our arrival has raised some questions." "Indeed it has. Perhaps you could help us understand exactly what the Terran Federation represents." Captain Chen gestured toward the conference room that had been prepared for their meeting. "I'd be delighted to, Admiral. But I should warn you, the answers might be more interesting than you expect." As they walked toward the conference room, Admiral HFY found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about first contact protocols. Captain Chen moved through the Imperial flagship like she belonged there, nodding politely to the Marine guards and showing genuine interest in the ship's architecture. She asked intelligent questions about Imperial engineering and complimented the efficiency of the vessel's design. She acted less like a nervous diplomat entering hostile territory and more like a curious tourist exploring an interesting museum. The conference room itself was designed to intimidate. Holographic displays showed the full extent of Imperial territory. Thousands of star systems under Calaxian control. The massive table was carved from a single piece of crystal taken from the Empire's first conquered world, and the chairs were arranged to emphasize the hierarchical nature of Imperial society. Captain Chen took her assigned seat without ceremony and waited politely for Admiral HFY to begin the formal proceedings. But when he activated the recording systems and began the standard diplomatic protocols, she held up one hand. "Admiral, before we start the formal stuff, could I ask you a personal question?" The request was so unexpected that HFY paused mid-sentence. What sort of question?" "How long have you been in space? I mean, how many years have you served in the Imperial Navy?" 843 years, he answered automatically, then wondered why he'd responded to such an irrelevant question. Captain Chen's eyebrows rose. 800 years? That's remarkable. You must have seen incredible changes during that time. The expansion of the empire, technological developments, first contact with dozens of species. I have, Zexhai admitted, finding himself oddly flattered by her interest. What was the most significant change you witnessed? Zexhai considered the question seriously. The development of hyperspace communications, he answered after a moment. Before that, coordinating an empire across multiple star systems was nearly impossible. Messages took years to travel between distant worlds. With instantaneous communication, the empire became truly unified for the first time. Fascinating, Captain Chen said, and she sounded like she meant it. We've been working on similar challenges. Space is so vast, and maintaining contact across interstellar distances requires some creative solutions. It occurred to Admiral Zexhai that he was enjoying the conversation, which seemed impossible under the circumstances. Here was a representative of an unknown species that had somehow penetrated imperial borders with a fleet of mysterious ships, and she was asking about his career like they were old colleagues sharing stories. "Captain," he said, returning to the formal tone appropriate for diplomatic proceedings, "perhaps we should discuss the matter at hand. Your ships have entered imperial space without authorization. Your people claim peaceful intentions, but your capabilities suggest otherwise. The Empire requires assurances that your presence doesn't represent a threat to imperial security." Captain Chen nodded seriously. "Of course, Admiral. Let me be completely honest with you about what the Terran Federation is and why we're here." She activated a small device that projected a three-dimensional star map into the air above the conference table. The display showed a region of space that Admiral Zexhai didn't recognize. Hundreds of star systems connected by what appeared to be trade routes and communication networks. "This is Federation space," Captain Chen began. "We're a democratic alliance of about 400 different species spread across roughly 12,000 star systems. We've been exploring this region of the galaxy for about 300 years, making contact with new civilizations and expanding our understanding of what's out here." Admiral Zexhai stared at the display, his mind struggling to process the implications. 400 species, 12,000 star systems. If the display was accurate, the Terran Federation was larger than the Calaxian Empire by an order of magnitude. "That's a substantial territory," he said carefully. "It is," Captain Chen agreed, "and it's growing. We encounter new civilizations every year, and about half of them choose to join the Federation after a period of cultural and technological exchange. The other half prefer to remain independent, which is fine with us. We believe in voluntary association, not conquest." "And where exactly is this Federation territory in relation to Imperial space?" Captain Chen touched her device, and the display zoomed out dramatically. Admiral Zexhai watched in growing amazement as the perspective expanded to show first the local galactic region, then a full quarter of the galaxy. The Calaxian Empire appeared as a small cluster of systems on the very edge of the map, while Federation territory stretched across vast distances toward the galactic core. "You're here," Captain Chen said, pointing to the Empire's position. "We're here." Her gesture indicated a region that appeared to be several thousand light-years away. "Impossible," Admiral Zexhai whispered. "No ship can travel such distances. The fuel requirements alone would be—" "Admiral," Captain Chen interrupted gently, "we're not using the same propulsion technologies you are. We stopped using fusion rockets and hyperspace tunnels about 200 years ago. Our current ships use what we call quantum displacement drives. Distance becomes somewhat irrelevant when you can step between points in space without actually traveling through the intervening area." The implications crashed over Admiral Zexhai like a tidal wave. If Captain Chen was telling the truth, The Terran Federation possessed technology that made them capable of projecting power across the entire galaxy. The Empire's borders, its defensive positions, its strategic advantages, all of it became meaningless if an enemy could appear anywhere in Imperial space without warning. But Captain Chen wasn't acting like an enemy. She was sharing information freely, answering questions honestly, and treating him with the respect due to a fellow professional. Either she was the most skilled deceiver he'd ever encountered, or the Terran Federation was exactly what it claimed to be, an alliance of peaceful explorers interested in making new friends. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Captain Chen smiled again, and this time Admiral HFY was beginning to understand that her expressions were genuine. "Because, Admiral, we've learned that honest communication prevents misunderstandings. We're not here to threaten anyone or claim territory. We're here because the galaxy is a big, interesting place, and we've found that most civilizations have something valuable to contribute to the common good. We'd like to find out what the Calaxian Empire might be interested in sharing." Admiral HFY realized that everything he thought he knew about galactic civilization had just become obsolete. The Empire wasn't the dominant power he'd believed it to be. They weren't even a significant regional force compared to what Captain Chen was describing. They were a small, isolated civilization that had just made contact with something far beyond their previous experience, and somehow that didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an opportunity. Whose fleet crosses? Our borders. Third document. 3 months after first contact, Admiral HFY stood once again on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. But everything had changed. The tactical displays that had once shown Imperial patrol routes and defensive positions now displayed something unprecedented in the Empire's history. Peaceful trade convoys moving freely between Calaxian and Terran space. The transformation had been remarkable. What began as a tense military standoff had evolved into the most profitable and enlightening exchange in Imperial history. The Federation had kept every promise Captain Chen made during their first meeting, and their representatives had proven to be everything she claimed: peaceful, honest, and genuinely interested in mutual benefit. "Admiral," Communications Officer Veltar announced, her tentacles dancing across the control panel with movements that had become familiar over the past months. "The Federation trade convoy, Harmony's Dream, is requesting clearance for the Velnox system. They're carrying the medical supplies for the plague outbreak on Velnox 7th. "Clearance granted," HFY replied immediately. The Velnox plague had been raging for 6 months before Federation doctors had arrived with treatments that Imperial medicine couldn't match. Hundreds of thousands of Imperial citizens were alive today because of Terran medical technology freely shared during the crisis. "Sir," Captain Mordex reported from his tactical station, "long-range sensors are detecting an Imperial convoy returning from Federation space. The Economic Prosperity and her escorts will reach the border in 4 hours. Admiral HFY nodded with satisfaction. The Economic Prosperity was one of 12 Imperial vessels that now regularly carried Calaxian goods to Federation markets. The profit margins were extraordinary. Federation citizens paid premium prices for Imperial crystalline artworks, Calaxian textiles, and especially the unique mineral resources found only in Imperial space. But the real revolution wasn't economic. It was philosophical. "Admiral," Science Officer Krellnin announced, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the research station at Thalmor. The Joint Federation Imperial team has completed their analysis of the quantum displacement drive principles. They're requesting permission to begin small-scale testing." The quantum displacement drive. 3 months ago, Admiral HFY couldn't have imagined Imperial scientists working alongside alien researchers to develop technology that seemed like magic. But Federation engineers had patiently explained the underlying physics, shared their research data freely, and invited Imperial scientists to participate in the development process. "Permission granted," HFY said, and remind them that all safety protocols must be followed. We're not in a rush to blow up a research station." The irony wasn't lost on him. The Empire had spent centuries acquiring new technologies through conquest and forced appropriation. The Federation had simply handed them the blueprints for faster-than-light travel that made Imperial hyperspace drives look like steam engines. They'd done it because, in their words, knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. "Sir," Veltar announced, "we're receiving a personal communication for you. Captain Chen aboard the UFS Endeavor." "Put her through." The main view screen displayed the familiar image of Captain Sarah Chen, who had somehow become both a diplomatic liaison and something approaching a friend over the past months. Her genuine warmth and obvious competence had won over even the most skeptical Imperial officers. "Admiral HFY," she said with her characteristic smile, "I hope you're well. I'm calling with some news I thought you'd want to hear personally." "Good news, I hope?" "Very good news. The Federation Council has completed its evaluation of the Calaxian Empire's application for associate membership. I'm pleased to inform you that the Council has voted to accept the Empire as the Federation's newest associate member." For a moment, Admiral HFY couldn't speak. Associate membership in the Terran Federation was something he'd never imagined possible 3 months ago. It meant access to Federation markets, technology, and knowledge. It meant Imperial citizens could travel freely throughout Federation space, studying at their universities, working in their industries, contributing to their research projects. Most importantly, it meant recognition as equals in the galactic community. "That's extraordinary news, Captain," he managed. "I'll inform the Emperor immediately." "There is one condition," Captain Chen continued, and HFY felt his spirits sink slightly. There were always conditions when dealing with galactic politics. "What condition?" "The Empire must agree to abide by Federation principles regarding the treatment of member species and the resolution of interspecies disputes. Basically, you'll need to settle disagreements through negotiation rather than conquest." Admiral HFY considered the implications. The Empire's expansion had always been through military force. Subject species accepted Imperial rule because they lacked the strength to resist, not because they chose subordination. The Federation was asking the Empire to abandon its primary tool of growth and control. "Captain, that's asking us to fundamentally change our approach to galactic relations." "I know," she replied seriously. "But Admiral, in the 3 months since first contact, has the Empire gained more through negotiation with the Federation than it would have gained through conquest?" The question hit home immediately. In 3 months of peaceful cooperation, the Empire had acquired medical technologies that would save millions of lives, manufacturing techniques that had doubled industrial output in key sectors, and scientific knowledge that had advanced Imperial understanding by centuries. The economic benefits alone were worth more than the tribute from a dozen conquered worlds. "Yes," he admitted, "we have." "Then imagine what you could accomplish in 3 years or 30 years working with hundreds of different species instead of ruling over them. The Federation isn't asking you to become weak, Admiral. We're inviting you to become strong in ways you haven't considered." After Captain Chen ended the transmission, Admiral HFY stood quietly on his bridge, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. The Calaxian Empire, which had dominated its region of space for 3 millennia, was being invited to join something larger than anything it had ever imagined. "Admiral," Veltar announced, "the Emperor is requesting immediate communication." "Put him through." Emperor Vaxthul's image appeared on the screen, and even across the vast distance of space, Admiral HFY could see the excitement in his sovereign's expression. "Admiral, I've just received word from Captain Chen about the Federation's offer. What is your assessment?" "Your Majesty, I believe this represents the greatest opportunity in Imperial history. The Federation offers us everything we've sought to achieve through conquest: prosperity, security, technological advancement, but through cooperation rather than domination. And their condition about abandoning military expansion? Admiral Zexhai thought carefully before responding. Sir, in my 8 centuries of service, I've watched the Empire grow through conquest. We've added systems, resources, and subject species. But in 3 months of cooperation with the Federation, we've grown in ways that conquest never provided. We've gained knowledge that makes our ships faster, medicines that heal diseases we couldn't cure, manufacturing techniques that have revolutionized our economy. Most importantly, we've gained recognition as equals by the most advanced civilization we've ever encountered. You're recommending acceptance? I am, Your Majesty. The Empire's strength has always been its ability to adapt and incorporate the best ideas from other species. The Federation is offering us the best ideas from 400 species across 12,000 star systems. To refuse would be to choose limitation over limitless possibility. Emperor Vax Thul was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, you've served the Empire faithfully for centuries. You've seen it grow from a single system to a regional power. In your opinion, what does the Empire become if we accept this offer? Something greater than we ever imagined, Your Majesty. The Empire doesn't end. It evolves. Instead of ruling through fear, we lead through example. Instead of taking what we need, we create what we want. Instead of being the dominant power in a small region, we become valued partners in a galactic community. And if we refuse? Admiral Zexhai considered the question seriously. Then we remain what we've always been, a regional power with regional influence. But the galaxy will move forward without us. The Federation will continue to grow, to explore, to achieve things we can only dream about. Eventually, we'll become obsolete. The Emperor nodded slowly. Summon the Imperial Council. We have a decision to make. 6 hours later, Admiral Zexhai stood in the Imperial Council chamber as Emperor Vax Thul addressed the assembled representatives of the Calaxian Empire. The debate had been intense but brief. The evidence was overwhelming. Cooperation with the Federation had already proven more beneficial than decades of traditional imperial expansion. The Calaxian Empire accepts the Federation's offer of associate membership, the Emperor announced. We do so not out of weakness, but out of strength. We choose to grow beyond what we have been and become what we could be. The chamber erupted in discussion, but Admiral Zexhai barely heard it. He was thinking about Captain Chen's words from their first meeting. We've found that most civilizations have something valuable to contribute to the common good. The Empire had spent 3,000 years proving its strength through dominance. Now it would have the chance to prove its worth through contribution. Imperial artists would share their techniques with Federation students. Imperial engineers would work alongside alien researchers on projects beyond current imagination. Imperial citizens would walk on worlds they'd never dreamed of visiting, learning from species they'd never known existed. "Admiral," came a familiar voice, and Admiral Zexhai turned to see Captain Chen entering the chamber. She'd been invited to witness the Empire's decision, and her presence somehow made the moment feel more significant. "Captain," he replied, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture that had become natural over the past months. "Welcome to the newest associate member of the Terran Federation." "Welcome to the galactic community, Admiral," she responded warmly. "I think you're going to love what comes next." As Admiral Zexhai looked around the chamber at his fellow Calaxians, some excited, some apprehensive, all of them facing a future unlike anything in their history, he realized that Captain Chen was right. The Empire had spent centuries asking who dared cross their borders. Now they were about to discover what lay beyond those borders, and the answer was more wonderful than they'd ever imagined. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders and possibilities and civilizations that chose cooperation over conquest. The Calaxian Empire was about to become part of something magnificent. 3 months ago, unknown ships had crossed Imperial borders, and Admiral Zexhai had prepared for war. Today, those same ships were leading the Empire toward a future of peace, prosperity, and unlimited potential. The greatest military campaign in Imperial history hadn't been fought with weapons and conquest. It had been won with conversation and trust. As Captain Chen had said during their first meeting, they really did believe in making good first impressions. The impression they'd made on the Calaxian Empire would change the course of galactic history, proving that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their unshakable belief that the universe was big enough for everyone to thrive together.